Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kulu wallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid walam yulad walam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Sadaqallahu azim. Good evening, and on behalf of Institute of Chartered Accountants, I welcome you all to this seminar on a very important subject, the Code of Corporate Governance. As you're all aware that the Code of the Corporate Governance was first introduced in Pakistan about 15 years from now, in 2002. And then it went through a first round of revisions, perhaps in 2012, and now in 2017, recently, another substantive set of revisions have been incorporated into the code through the corporate governance regulations, which have been recently introduced by the Security and Exchange Commission. So in this seminar today, we'll have a session where Mr. Abid Hussain, and we are very thankful to him for joining us for this presentation today, from SCCP, has joined us for a keynote presentation on the Code of Corporate Governance. He will take us through the key provisions of the revised code, and more importantly, the key reasons and rationales behind the changes which have been introduced in the code in 2017. After the keynote speech, we will have a panel discussion, which will, and also after the panel discussion, we'll take your question and answers, and then we will sum up the session after the question and answer session. So briefly speaking, this will be the program outline for today's session. And with that, I'll not take much of your time and would now invite Mr. Abid Hussain from SCCP to run his presentation on the Code of Corporate Governance for us. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, ICAP, for inviting me for this presentation. First of all, I must admit that I am not a good speaker or presenter. Therefore, any inconvenience caused is regretted in advance. So, Code of Corporate Governance, basically, you all must know that it evolved over the years. For companies, they have to make business case for the Code of Corporate, for the good governance, and they need to reconcile their strategy for accessing better capital and cultivating company's image and ensure legal compliances. For regulator, it is a tool to improve institutional environment, empower the board, and to ensure fair competition, transparency, and accountability for the board as well. So I just take you through the background. The code was introduced in 2002 first time. The main feature were to encourage presence of independent and non-executive directors on the board. First time directors were restricted to have maximum 10 directorship on listed companies, because it was seen that a person working on 30 boards at the same time, so it was not possible for a human unless he has 4 heads or 8 hands to work objectively, and that's why the maximum directorships were restricted to 10. Then it was preferred that a chairman of the board should be a non-executive director. Then it was the board discretion to decide to have separate board chairman and the CEO. First time the audit committee and internal audit functions were introduced, and then statement of compliance with the Code of Corporate Governance was introduced at that time. Obviously the code was included in the listing regulations of the stock exchanges at that time. Then then the code was revised in the year 2012. Again, the feature was to strengthen the board structure, introduction of executive, non-executive, and independent directors. The first time the independent director was made mandatory. Earlier it was preferably to have independent director. The office of the chairman and the CEO was separated, and directors training program was made mandatory for the first time in 2012 to have educated directors. Then the CFO and the head of internal audit qualification was introduced in the 2012 code. That was not the only set of corporate governance for the listed companies. There was separate code of corporate governance for insurance companies. Then the corporate governance rule for public sector companies was introduced in 2013, which were recently amended in 2017. SCCP also introduced voluntary principles of corporate governance for non-listed companies in order to prepare the small companies for the bigger role in future if they want to. I want to add the role of Institute of Corporate Governance here too, because it is one of the main institute which has a responsibility to create awareness regarding the corporate governance, impart education on corporate governance to all key stakeholders, and bringing improvement in the quality of governance structure in Pakistan. The code was revised in 2017. A task force was formed under the able leadership of Mr. Ibrahim Sadat. Different members were the practitioners, lawyers, and a representative from SCCP. Series of meetings were held from March 2016 to February 2017. The code draft was finalized, keeping in view the international best practices and local industry appetite, and the task force submitted this report in March 2017. However, the revised draft was withheld as the Companies Act 2017 was in the final stage of promulgation. Then the Companies Act was introduced in May 2017. Section 156 contains the enabling provision for the corporate governance regulations. The draft was submitted by the task force, was revised in order to eliminate any conflicts between the Act and the regulations. And finally, the Code of Corporate Governance regulations were notified in November 2017. So I'll now take you through the main features of the regulations of 2017. Directors limit that was reduced from 10 to 7 is now limited to 5 in case of listed companies. However, directorship in listed subsidiary companies of the same group is excluded. The same was also exempt in the Code of 2012. Executive directors are still 1/3 of the board, and diversity continue to be focus of the corporate governance regulations, which is also my wish. And during the discussion, Ibrahim Saab was quite focused. Instead of having a board of father, son, or the son-in-law, may be at one time we have a board of independent directors and qualified in law and the finance, so that they can focus on the important businesses. In the Companies Act 2017, the role of female director is also introduced, and it was a special section was introduced to have female representation on the board of listed companies. So corporate governance regulation says board shall have at least one female director when the board is next reconstituted or within 1 year of issue of regulation, whichever is higher. Question arises how to find 700 qualified women to have one at least on each board. So I think 11 करोड़ की आबादी में से 700 ख़वातीन तो शायद मिल ही जानी चाहिए. इस पे बहुत डिबेट थी whether to have independent female director on the board or just to have a female director on the board. But it was thought that it would be too aggressive approach if we go for an independent female director at this stage. So let's stick to have one female director on the board, and let's see, maybe down the road 5 years, we may have independent female directors on the board. Section 166 basically prescribes qualification of independent director in a database. Now, independent directors cannot be chosen at the discretion of the majority shareholders. Now they have to refer to a data bank, and SSEP has just yesterday notified Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance as the institute to maintain this database of independent directors. CG regulation says number of independent directors must be 2 or 1/3, whichever is higher. So the bar has been raised from 1 to 2. I have received number of queries from different companies कि ये आप लोगों ने क्या कर दिया. हमारे 2 ग्रुप हैं एंड हम पहले 3-3 डायरेक्टर थे, एक हमने इंडिपेंडेंट रखा हुआ था, 7 डायरेक्टर्स थे, अब हमें 4-4 करके वो 4 हम होंगे, 4 दूसरे ग्रुप के होंगे और 2 इंडिपेंडेंट डायरेक्टर्स हमें रखने पड़ेंगे. तो मैंने कहा सर सॉरी, शायद आपने क्लॉज आधी पढ़ी है, उसके आगे लिखा हुआ है 2 or 1/3. सो इफ़ यू इंक्रीज द नंबर ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स फ्रॉम 7 to 10, then you must have 3 independent directors, and rest of the discussion is not appropriate to be discussed at this forum, I guess. So independent director is not just the independent director chosen from the data bank. The independent director must have to file a declaration with the company that he is independent in terms of the criteria given in the section 166. Another interesting question that I have received from a company कि अगर कोई independent director, आपने कहा है कि 2 होने चाहिए, 2 में से अगर एक independent director अगर conflicted हो जाता है या अगर उसका interest आ जाता है तो फिर क्या होगा. तो मैंने कहा it's a rare circumstance, however he has to excuse and he has to declare his interest like a normal other directors who have to declare their interest in case conflict arises. Now the discretion has been abolished from the companies, and the chair of the audit committee and the HR committee must be with the independent directors. Earlier the discretion was with the board to select the chair of the audit committee and the HR. However, a caveat has been added that chairman of the board, if independent, cannot be the same person as the chair of audit committee. That was to mitigate the conflict of interest situation, because chairman of the board might be interested in audit committee meetings. Strengthening governance, then the quorum of the board was made more stringent. Wherever the board of directors have interest, there the 2 independent directors are made mandatory to attend that meeting. So without having 2 independent directors, that meeting cannot convene, the quorum cannot be complete. So all the directors are required to attend the company's general meetings, ordinary or extraordinary, unless precluded from doing so to any reasonable cause. Number of questions and queries that we are receiving at SCCP is on this clause. The directors don't want to attend the general meetings. एक साहब ने तो मुझे ये कहा कि वो बहुत मुअज़्ज़ज़ लोग होते हैं, तो मैंने कहा क्या शेयर होल्डर्स या पाकिस्तान के दूसरे शहरी मुअज़्ज़ज़ नहीं होते? How come you say कि directors मुअज़्ज़ज़ होते हैं, they can't attend the general meetings? वो शेयर होल्डर तो जी चाय में इंटरेस्टेड होते हैं, खाने में इंटरेस्टेड होते हैं. Majority of the shareholders are not interested in the agenda even. So why you are forcing the directors to attend the general meetings? मैंने कहा जी उनको फिर कहें कि किसी MNA या MPA का इलेक्शन लड़ लें ताकि फिर 5 साल तक अपने वोटर से उनकी मुलाकात ना हो. तो reason the board should be there at the general meetings to answer the queries of the shareholders who have invested their good money, and the company is responsible